Mrs. Merrill?
Present.
Mr. Steiger? Here. Mr. Arcuri? Here. Mr. Ball? Present. Mr. Berquist? Here. Mr. Kozer? Here. Mr. Lewis?
Here. All right, so join us for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, first item is a public hearing.
And we've asked Mr. Coons to come to do the presentation with regard to the public hearing. Only 2 slides I can flip them to.
That's right. Good evening, members of council. It's nice to be in front of you again. I get to see you all together all that often. As you recall, back in May of this year, we had a joint workshop between you and some members of Planning Commission to review some potential changes to the Township zoning ordinances. We've had identified some additional issues here in the past couple of years that we thought were prudent to address. We've, as staff, gone through and took your comments from that workshop and prepared a list of proposed ordinance amendments. That went before the Township Planning Commission on August the 16th of this past year. They provided a recommendation to you for approval. And I'm just going to run through these ordinance changes tonight, hit the high points, and then answer any questions you might have of me. One of the overall changes that we're proposing is a revision to the definition of height of building. This would be a comprehensive change across the entire zoning ordinance on how we measure building height. What we would be doing is adding an addendum to the end of the definition to not only say that it's taken at the front of the building, but also the same opposite side of the building. So if it's the front on the street, it's the back of the building as well. Really to prevent any situations where someone's potentially bypassing the building height limit by just chopping it in at the back of the building. In regard to the town center in particular, which is the zoning district here around the intersection of East McMurray and Valley Brook, we have a number of changes. We would be reducing the maximum floor area ratio, which is the maximum development potential of a piece of property, from 1 to 0.85. That would be in line with the Waters development. They were under that 1 number, and we're at that 0.85, and we heard that would be the max we would ever want to see again. So we're matching that in the ordinance. We would be increasing the minimum maximum front yard setbacks from a 20-foot minimum to a 25-foot maximum, and a 25-foot maximum to a 30-foot maximum, just kind of pushing potential development off the right-of-ways a little bit. Removing entirely 4-story buildings as a permitted conditional use. It would be stricken entirely from the zoning ordinance. If anybody ever wanted to potentially go 4 stories, it would require a variance from the Township zoning ordinance. We would then be looking at 3 stories as a permitted use by right in the zoning districts. And along with that, we would be reducing maximum building height in line with 4 stories down to 3 stories, just moving everything down accordingly. We would also be changing our step-back slope approach in the town center district, requiring that the 3rd story of a building be stepped back 50 feet from any property line, and that similarly a 2nd story of any building be stepped back 20 feet from either Valley Brook or East McMurray Road.
What about side setbacks? Because I know when we built that residential or whatever it is down here on the corner of Friar.
The Waters?
The Waters.
Yeah.
That was only supposed to be, take a 15-foot setback, and we ended up making it 40.
In terms of side setback? The side setback for principal buildings in the town center district, it's a 5-foot maximum. You're really allowed to build up to the side property lines. What that allows you to do in some of these more dense developments is have a continuous building facade along different properties as an option. But
I think 5 feet is ridiculous. Especially at that place. It was going to be right up against Friar Lane, right across the street from
Well-
residential development.
Friar Lane in that situation would not have been a side yard. It is a front yard because it's a corner lot. So they would have to abide by that 25-foot minimum, 30-foot maximum with that step back slope, also taken into consideration for potentially Friar Lane. But definitely Valley
Was
Brook.
there any consideration given to making the norm a two-level building with the three being a conditional use?
We took the approach that we felt third story would be best as a permitted use, not having to go through the conditional use process.
Did you evaluate all the potential properties that are on, in the town center to make sure that that was workable?
And so when we're looking at the majority of town center properties that are available, we've got some sections down here on Valley
It's all
Brook.
available for a price. So, I mean, you know, are there some lots there that would not be appropriate?
For example, by the trail, is that what you're thinking, Mr. Curie?
There's probably multiple ones like that, but yes, that could be one.
Well, in regard to that, we also have to consider the step-back slope approach. I mean, you have to put that third story at minimum 50 feet from any property line. And that second story would be 20 feet from a property line. So, you know, we're not going to have a third story right up against the rear property line or the trail, as it may be in that situation.
What would be the setback from the trail if someone decided to develop a building along there?
We would be looking at 25-foot minimum. That includes, you know, you can't do parking in that area. There's some buffer requirements there as well. And again, that would also include that step-back slope. So your third story potentially would be an additional 25 feet off of that property line.
It just seems like we're losing perspective of what McMurray Town Center was supposed to be. It was supposed to be a town feel, make it like a downtown area. Now we're just making it like any other suburban
And that
area.
reaction is because we squeezed in a building that far exceeds the relationship with size ratios. I mean, that's why, in my mind, we need to do this.
Shifting to a residential perspective on this, we made some changes to both the conservation residential and our mixed residential overlay districts. We were proposing to increase the cartway width from 20 feet to 24 feet. That would include a 2-foot wedge curb on each side of the road. So you'd have a 10-foot cartway, 2-foot wedge curb on each side for a total of 24 feet in width. Same right-of-way width, just increasing that cartway to just allow for a little bit more space for vehicular traffic to get through. Increasing the minimum lot width for any single-family detached lot from 50 feet to 75 feet. Just spacing out those houses a little bit more by increasing that minimum lot width. Adding in a maximum unit width for townhouses and duplexes and the mixed residential overlay to match that found in the conservation residential overlay. It's just 24 feet for townhouses, 36 feet max for duplexes. And then adding off-street parking requirements for guest parking spaces in both of these overlays. We've identified in some of our newer developments that what we're really lacking is an opportunity for on-street parking. We have, you know, good-sized houses that can have a number of guests, and the driveways just maybe aren't servicing everyone's needs year-round. So we're proposing to introduce one parking space for every 5 residential units, but stipulating that it be evenly distributed throughout the plan. That would kind of be incumbent upon staff to make sure that's done, but would hopefully give us some locations where we can have some guest parking to avoid any vehicular congestion issues. Those are the breadth of my changes this evening. We've talked a little bit about town center, but I'm happy to answer any other questions you may have.
I think it would be very useful to you give us some typical renderings of these different relationships. Remember when we started this, we had some renderings that showed different street relationships, house relationships. Because it's, you know, here's what we originally talked about, here's what the proposal leads us to.
Right.
That would be helpful.
Understood.
And as, you know, some of our people in the township look at it,
Yeah, right.
don't understand it.
Sure.
So I continue to be very concerned about parking. We went to some of these narrower streets
Right.
for who knows what reason, but they don't work. And parking is a problem because as you get closer to the curb with these houses, it's hard to fit a car in a driveway. And even in some of the regular developments that we have now, as I drive around town, I see multiple cars parked in front of them, and it's kind of hard to get around them. So think about some of those.
No, Mr. Ball, I'm actually really glad you mentioned that. I apologize. I missed one change in my PowerPoint presentation here. We're also proposing to increase minimum setbacks in conservation residential and mixed residential overlays somewhat to address that concern. We're currently at no less than 15 feet and no more than 25 feet. We're proposing no less than 25 feet to the right-of-way, and then no more than 30 feet to push those houses further back off the cartway. Here in the township, we've realized that we have some really large vehicles, and at our smaller setbacks, we were having issues with cars parked in driveways blocking sidewalks, and so this is an intention to.
These narrower houses, I would imagine many of them will have single-car garages.
Two-car.
We're seeing a lot of two-car. Yeah.
Still
I know
two-car.
we see some, I mean, they're...
Most are,
Yeah, I think
no single.
we're going to continue to see two-car garage.
Some of the ones in just about are actually free.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm just thinking, I mean, there's, how much driveway space do you have?
And that's exactly what that specific change was hoping to address, was pushing those houses further away from the road. We get additional driveway length. You can fit more cars in without encroaching onto the street or the sidewalks.
Seth, if we review this in October and it becomes approved, who would be affected? Anything going forward then? Any development, or are developments currently under?
It's a pending ordinance now. So we've had some prospective projects come to us in the last couple weeks, and we've pushed this to them saying, this is a pending ordinance. We can enforce it accordingly. These are things you need to take into consideration.
Just so that people understand the timing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
For addressing the items that
Any council questions, comments, about audience comments?
These
You
garages,
gotta come up to the...
oh, sorry.
podium.
Do I have to say my name and all that?
Name and address.
Okay, I'm Irene Changle, and I live at the Waters. Okay? I forget his name.
Seth.
Seth. Is he considering for these garages, these big trucks that people are buying now? Like there's a white one parked out front here that takes almost 2 parking spaces. Is that in consideration? These big 4x4 trucks?
Yes. Yeah,
So
we have
those-
oversized parking spaces here in the
All right,
township.
what about the garage? Will it fit in a garage? No.
In someone's
Garage
personal
in one of
garage?
these townhouses.
It really depends on how big that person chooses for their garage to be built. Some
Oh, so some of them are going to be big enough to put a
Yeah.
4x4 in?
potentially, sure.
Oh, okay. I just didn't know, because where we're at now, we're not even filled. And they're putting people in there. I just can't, I don't know how they're doing it, but,
Are you saying that the garage is tight?
well, they charge us $75 a month to park in the garage.
I see.
Now, we have 2 cars, and we're not putting them in there in the winter. I could write a book, to put it bluntly, but I was concerned about your garages. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I have a question. Are any of those parking spaces that are going to be created, are any of them going to be handicap spaces, or how do we deal with that?
That's a great question. Yeah, I mean, the American Disabilities Act does establish a certain number of minimum parking spaces. When you provide so many parking spaces, we'll have to address it accordingly if it triggers a requirement for a handicap parking space. Yeah, but that's a very good point. Thank you.
Any other comments?
Good evening, Mike Wetzel with Victor Wetzel Associates. Just more of a question for Seth. The off-street parking space requirements, can you do does it have to be a parking lot, or can we just add like parallel parking spaces? I just want a clarification of the off-street.
We have plenty of width in the right-of-ways to accommodate on-street parking. Off-street parking and a separate parking lot might be necessary, but we can do on-street parking as well.
Okay, so you can do then parallel parking as well as 90-degree?
Yeah.
That, okay, just wanted to make sure on that design. Thank you.
I'll just wait 30
Any other
seconds.
comments?
I move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Discussion, in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, hearing is closed. Thank you.
Can you spell your name?
Wetzel, W-E-T-Z-E-L.
What was your first name? Thank you.
Okay.
That's it, you're done.
Told you we were going to keep you here until 11. Okay. Thank you very much. All right, the next item is approval of the minutes from the September 13th meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. All right, in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Special reports, there are none. Audience comments on non-agenda items. Mr. Don.
Bob Donnan, 107 Southview Court, McMurray, PA. Before I start, I want to thank Monica Merrill for her dedicated service all these many years. I don't know if I'll be back down here to see you guys before the end of the year.
Before the end of the year. Thank you.
Sends out a monthly email, keeps everyone up to date. Someone needs to pick up the ball. Okay, members of Peters Township Council, staff, and township residents. In 2019, Greg Winks from Soul Bridge Energy Advisors and I did a presentation to the Environmental Quality Board on the future use of solar energy in Peters Township. I talked to Greg today. His website is solbridgeea.com, Soul Bridge Energy Advisors. The EQB was quite favorably impressed and sent council their recommendations dated January 14th, 2020, stating in part, the Environmental Quality Board at a recent meeting discussed the use of solar PV energy as a means to increase the sustainability efforts in the township. Electricity from the solar PV technology is clean, renewable, and carbon negative. Offsetting electricity purchased from the grid with solar PV can save the township money while supporting goals aimed at adopting sustainable practices. Going further, undertaking a feasibility study would provide the council with a guide for the sustainable implementation of renewable energy technology. We encourage the council to review the information and take it into consideration while deciding the future use of energy in the township. Letter was signed by Amanda Cribbs, chair of the EQB. So in the meantime, Fox Chapel's putting solar on 2 of their new buildings. And one that they're re-roofing, they're putting solar on it. And there's more to come. They figure panels have a 30-year life, and their return on investment's roughly 16 years. In the same vein, I'd recommend council members study a newly released document from our state's Department of Environmental Protection, or DEP. It's called the Pennsylvania Climate Action Plan 2021. Strategies for government, business, agriculture, and community leaders, that's yins guys, and all Pennsylvanians, dated September 22, 2021. So it's like 5 days old. Excerpts from that report. Rising temperatures and heavy precipitation with inland flooding are identified in the impacts assessment as the 2 highest risk hazards by mid-century. The average annual temperature statewide is expected to increase by 6 degrees Fahrenheit. Extreme heat events will also increase 90-plus degree temperatures expected to occur 37 days per year, up from 5 days right now, historically. Such impacts will be, for example, alter the growing season, increase cooling energy use, and decrease heating energy use. Total average rainfall will increase, coming in less frequent but heavier rain events, but drought conditions are also expected to occur more frequently. So will Peters Township take a leadership role in fighting climate change, or hide in the bushes while communities like Fox Chapel take a leadership role? They're, as I said, they're installing solar on 2 new buildings, as well as one on where it's getting a new roof. I noticed our our old fire halls got a new roof, and I don't even know if we looked at solar for that. And I know the one on Bebout, that wasn't really seriously considered there either. So was the EQB just wasting their breath recommending a feasibility study, or is council going to act on that? Mr. Ball? Oh, no, okay. And finally, it's alarming for me to still see so many hazard trees, what professionals call widowmakers, still standing in Peterswood Park near walking trails. Ones I alerted the township to many months ago. Some of them now you could push over with your finger probably, and they're big. There's even one monster in the grassy area near the upper soccer fields with 2 fallen limbs laying near its base, each one large enough to have killed or maimed a park visitor. So what's going on? What's going on with the trees?
I think we've explained a couple times, and Mr. Lowry, you can explain our program. We have a tree program, as you well know. We spend a lot of money on each year. It's just more trees than we can handle in a year, but we keep after them.
Well, you need to do a better job on that. Okay, thank you.
Amazing number of trees, though.
Thank you, Mr. Dolan.
Anybody else? Okay, unfinished business. There's no new business.
Mr. Robinson had asked for an opportunity to come speak to council about a plan to use the property that we have leased to him in conjunction with his own property for use as a pickleball facility. And so I'll turn it over to you guys.
Is there a clicker to move?
You can't, because you sent me PDFs.
Oh, okay.
You did not send me a PowerPoint, so I can roll through these.
That'll be fine. I'll let you know. Thank you.
Okay.
Good evening. My name's Mike Wetzel with the firm Victor Wetzel Associates. I'm also here tonight with Tom Robinson, and we're here tonight for the Valley Brook Road property and to discuss what's considered the level up pickleball concept plan through this area. As we go through the slides, wanted to first off talk about, once again, the existing conditions of the site and the site that's there today. As you see in the slide through here, we have Valley Brook Road located right along through this portion of the property. This is the 2-acre property that's owned by Peters Township, which is currently being used as a detention facility for the West Edge development area up along and through this area. That parcel is about 1.5 acres in size, located through here. Then there's lot number 2 that's located right along to this section, which is owned by Mr. Robinson, and it's 6.8 acres in size. As you once again recall, Brush Creek flows through this section. There is a floodway area and then some floodplain area. Just off to this side of the property is the lot number 1, which was donated by Mr. Robinson to the township that took into account 2.4 acres in size. So, in regard to the next slide, you also recall.
What donated to us? I thought it was a swap.
It is, I don't know how you want to say that. Yes, it was a swap, if you want to call it donated. The township has ownership
of it. Yes. So, and then once again, over the past year, we've had 2 plans associated with the Valley Brook Road site. Within this area, we have the approved dessert shop site plan in through here. And then last year, we had the approval of the proposed medical office building, which was 9,200 square feet and two stories in elevation. And once again, we had the access into the site with a parking facility in through here and another parking facility through this portion of the site. So that was the current approved plan that's on tap for the Valley Brook Road site. Now, under the site area, once again, we're under the Valley Brook Mixed-Use Corridor zoning district. Under this section, you're allowed to have recreation as part of the uses. What we see is our pickleball facility would be a private recreation facility located in through here, which is also a special exemption. So if we do get, I'll say, a favorable review in regard to our concept plan, we would need to be able to then move forward to the Planning Commission as well as the ZHB for the special exemption of the development. Mr. Wayne Dollard, who's also a Peters Township resident, would be the actual run the maintenance of the pickleball facility. I'm not sure if many people know Mr. Dollard in regard to his site. He's the owner of Level Up Pickleball. Level Up Pickleball is a kind of a national company. They do pickleball facilities and also camps located throughout the United States. There's about 139 camps in 33 states, 90 cities that take place throughout the whole year. Mr. Dollard's also the publisher of Pickleball Magazine, founder of Level Up Camps. From a pickleball sport, he's also U.S. Open and National Championship. As I mentioned, he's also a Peters Township resident through this section. So this is something he sees as a worthwhile investment in regard to the plan. In regard to the concept plan that we have in front of you, once again, Valley Brook Road and through here, our access into the site would occur really around the same location that took place with the previous development through here, and we're looking initially as a two-phase development. As we come in through here, overall, the master plan, it would be the intention of, in the development, to create a indoor pickleball facility. Under the phase one plans, we would more make those a outdoor pickleball facility, but eventually be a covered facility. That would be this building right along and through here. This is the area that's currently owned by the township, and under the agreements that you have, Mr. Robinson's in charge of any, even with the dessert shop, in charge of all maintenance of the site. That includes maintenance of the detention facility and the associated grounds. Once again, I think that is how long of a lease is that, Tom? 100-year lease that he has requirements of maintaining that property. With that area, once it becomes a building area or even with the design, the idea is that we would need to relocate or redo the stormwater detention facility. Under this particular section, we feel that some of the initial studies that we can put these into some large oversized tanks that would be able to be located along this portion of the site to be able to maintain the required stormwater management for the residential community above. Once again, if it's moved into a tank system, all the maintenance would be the requirement of the Thomas A. Robinson Family Trust and all its heirs. So that would be a 100-year lease in regard to the maintenance of that underground detention facility at that location. So when we also look at the rest of the plan, so we would have the indoor facility located along and through here. We would have a parking facility located at this portion, very similar to the medical office building. That would be 60 parking spaces through this area. We would then have 3 outdoor courts along through here with a drop-off area, a little patio space, and then an outdoor shelter section through here. And very similar to the dessert shop plan and medical office building, we would then move the boardwalk area along this portion of the site to go up to the Arrowhead Trail. At this location, we'd really be looking at doing a park and trail enhancement area, provide a shelter, rest stop, tool section associated. We'll go through some of that detail. But as you have that boardwalk going across, there would be an elevated viewing building located above the floodplain through this section, walk back down into a patio space, and then provide 6 outdoor courts, and then a little bit of a walking trail along this area. So this is really some of the master plan that we're looking for the Valley Brook Road pickleball concept. And to kind of look at a little bit more detail, we'll go into the phase 1. You can see once again a little bit more of the detail. Once again, we would look at phase 1 to really just doing outdoor courts in this location and eventually covering those areas. This is the area of the grading and creating the underground stormwater through this area. And above this location, we would have rain gardens associated as a filtering device as part of the detention facility. As part of the building in itself, we'd be looking at trying to do a lot of the structures as some green roof structures. Once again, as we heard some comments from during public comment area, trying to provide some alternative means for stormwater management, as well as providing green roofs associated with that. So that's what represents the green areas within there, providing some green roof properties. Once again, the parking lot area, once again, that could be used associated with the trail, and a sidewalk area that would connect 2 areas through here. This would be a front little patio and the front entrance to the indoor facility through this portion. For the parking lot, very similar to the approved medical office building, there would be stormwater management under the parking lots over and through here. And then a little bit more of the outdoor shelter through this section, adding rain gardens along and through here, rain gardens through here, as well as providing the required buffer yard along Valley Brook Road. And then lastly, under phase 1, this would be the 3-court complex through this section. Once again, then we look at the phase 2, there'd be the construction of the boardwalk area, which would be the elevated viewing area, the 6 courts and the walking trail down along and through this area. And then once again, the ramp associated with the getting up to the Arrowhead Trail, and then the rest stop area that would be developed. And to really kind of give you an idea of what some of these visions would be, we have some, as part of the submission that we gave you, as you know, the pickleball court facilities, these are actually photos from the Cranberry Park section through here. Very similar in regard to tennis courts, but they're really much smaller in size. Some cases we have only 4-foot fencing in some through these areas, fencing between the courts. Along the exterior area would be more of a 6-foot fence. You can kind of see how the gate system works and access into the pickleball facilities. Pickleball facilities is a very hot trend in the United States, and also especially even in Pittsburgh. I'll say in regard to the Cranberry site, all their memberships, they've even stopped doing a waiting list associated with the public end of that, no longer taking any applications to be part of that. So what we feel is in regard to a indoor facility, this is one from another design that was done within the United States. This would be the typical look you would see along Valley Brook Road, with either stone or brick, glass areas in through here. These could either be glass or open up as opened up garage units, really trying to make it compatible to the Valley Brook Road and providing a very nice feature associated with it. This is actually a typical indoor facility that's in use today. The building would be about 110 by 240, or 26,000 square feet. Within that area, you'd be able to do pickleball, badminton, tennis courts, and maybe some small office space associated with it. And we'd be looking at doing the green roof gardens. Whole idea is to really kind of open up this building and also get views down to the Brush Creek area when the weather is nice, to be able to open up the building for the use. once again, we'd be working a combination of rain gardens throughout the whole site to, once again, take into account stormwater and water quality. Try to provide some very modern type uses of outdoor shelters and incorporating the green roof structures associated with this type of shelter area.
Would all those impervious surfaces going to generate more water runoff?
Oh, yes, we would have to do a stormwater management plan and report, just like we did with the medical office building and the dessert shop. We'd have to have a full report done. You take a look at all of the water quality, detention requirements, pipe sizing, which would be reviewed. But once again, we're at a conceptual stage to see if we could be able to move forward with the special exemption type of reviews.
What happened to the medical office building?
At this time, Mr. Robinson's not finding that market that's available through this. Yeah.
It's not pickleball.
So we're looking at trying to add that recreation component to along this corridor.
Or you'll need the medical facilities.
But once again, it's a very low impact type of sport. We've kind of convinced Traditions of America to get rid of all of their tennis courts and put in these pickleball facilities. Less impact, smaller court. Ball design really doesn't travel as far as a tennis ball. A lot more friendly in regard to our active older adults as well as myself. Enjoy playing pickleball quite a bit. So. Once again, the crossing over Brush Creek, this is the actual same type of boardwalk that's up next to the residential site next to us that Mr. Robinson built. So we'd have the crossing of the bridge. You can see with the type of steps, you provide the rail system so you can bring up and down a bike. So you're not carrying a bike, you're just wheeling that bike up to get it up to the Arrowhead Trail, which would make that a very convenient use for the access in and out to the Arrowhead Trail. And then once again, as we mentioned, we'd look at doing. Oh.
You just made me think of something when you said that. So the parking that you're planning is related to the proposed pickleball courts, and then you would have to then factor additional parking in for potential trail parking?
Sure, we would, right. Yes, sort of like with the medical office building, we would have some parking available for the trail use as well.
So that would be over and above what you would require for the pickleball
Correct.
usage?
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry to stop you.
That's okay. And as I was kind of closing up, right along our trail access to the Arrowhead Trail, we'd like to provide some type of shelter, picnic area, rest area along the trail, and also some maintenance equipment for bikes throughout the plan. So once again, as we kind of wrap up, we're looking for comments in regard to council in regard to the Valley Brook Road pickleball concept that we think would really kind of enhance, once again, still the corridor of Valley Brook Road with a recreational component within this area, as well as providing access to the Arrowhead Trail. Glad to answer any questions that the board might have at this time.
Had some comments on stormwater.
Oh, yes, and it's, to me, it's an overriding concern. The property that is located as parcel 2 is the stormwater management facility for the neighboring homes. And when we entered into a lease with the idea that that would be maintained. And where Mr. Wetzel's absolutely correct. We have transferred responsibility for maintenance of that facility to Mr. Robinson. The fact of the matter is, if he fails in that regard, it's coming back to you, because we are the responsible party for the Act 537 plan. For the stormwater management plan. And I would be very concerned about if, in fact, there were tanks installed to handle that stormwater management. How and if the township could, if it had to, maintain those at some future date. Now, we will all not be here when that needs to occur, but the township will.
Oh, Mr. Lewis may still be.
Well, Mr. Lewis might still be, yeah. And that's my concern. And, you know, in terms of a use, this certainly is a permitted use. I think it's a good use for the property, but I have a problem getting past the stormwater management facility.
The other issue, I mean, it's the township's property. I mean, we'd have to put this out for bid, just like we did the
That
coffee
would be
shop.
my next question is what.
Yeah, you just can't say we want to do this on the township's property. Right now, they just have a maintenance obligation. They have no rights to use it. We would have to put this out for bid for anybody to want to do that. If we're going to maintain ownership, and I think that's what you're saying, that it's going to just lease it from the township? Is that the
Correct. Yeah, currently, as it is a lease right now.
Well, that property
yes.
is not leased. That's just a maintenance obligation.
No. That property is leased.
But, I mean, that piece of it is just for
Yes.
maintenance.
No, it's leased. It's leased to be used.
We have the coffee shop, but then we have the,
But that coffee shop's on that property.
well, I understand, but the rest of the detention pond's there for maintenance obligations,
Yes.
not for use.
And Mark, I presume there's some DEP requirements you'd have to go through in order to fill in a retention facility, right? Do you have any idea what those are?
I don't know if it'd be so much DEP. I mean, we already own and maintain, well, we own the facility, so I think it'd probably be up to us to, approve converting it to tanks.
Yes.
I do agree with Paul. I think it's a general statement. I mean, I can't really think of another subdivision plan that's controlled with tanks.
The only place that's controlled by tanks, and that was not by design but by remediation, is in Ironwood.
No, that's not right.
Where else?
Well, in one is the property, Sesame Inn.
Oh, no, I'm talking about residential subdivisions. There's a lot of tanks out there that sit there. In fact, there was a tank on this property for this development, so there's a lot of tanks for commercial developments. But we were trying to think through this. I think the only place that I can think of that there is a tank for a residential development, and
that's township maintained.
That's township maintained is Ironwood.
Is there an alternative to a tank? I'm going to think of an alternative.
It's detention.
It would be the hole in the ground as a detention facility as it is today. So those really are only the two options. We have the current detention facility that's it's an open basin, and then as was kind of talked about, especially in the private land development end, considerable amount of stormwater underground tanks. Once again, the plan for the medical office building had underground tanks and through here and over along and through here. Our Aquino plan that Tom's currently working on, stormwater management's located in underground tanks at that. I think it's coming down to whether public versus private in regard to the tanks. Tanks are more at a satisfactory type of use. We need to be able to prove that in regard to the storage capacity through our stormwater management submittal. If and when we move forward with this project, it would need to be reviewed in regard to that stormwater management plan with the township staff and township engineer.
Could we also back up to the lease a minute so that I can understand how this would impact the lease? Mr. Robinson has a lease with us. I thought it was for 50 years with an option to extend, but it was also the rent would be generated from revenue from the dessert stand, concession stand, whatever, coffee shop, whatever it was going to be. You just said that this was going to be a private facility. I'm trying to understand how that then equates to the township getting their rent. Mr. Smith, can you help me?
I'm less concerned about the rent. Obviously, if they're for profit, they would have the money to pay some rent, albeit we haven't built rent in for this facility. It's just for the coffee shop. But if the board remembers, on township property, the idea was an amenity for the people that use your trail. And the coffee shop was going to be that amenity versus now this is going to be a private club for non-trail users, that they're going to have private memberships.
So my question is, does that then require a rewriting of the lease because, in fact, the original intent changed now?
I don't think, and that's why I started to clamor on early on. My concern was that we put this out for bid, for request for proposals, if you remember, because we wanted to make sure we gave everyone equal access. And we never did this. I mean, we never envisioned anything but a coffee shop. And they were going to maintain this pond as something the coffee shop would overlook.
I remember.
And now, I don't see how that lease with that minimum rent requirement, imagine getting this big commercial property to do a public for-profit enterprise on the township's dollar
Right.
for the original, what do we pay a month, $1,500 or something? I don't even know. I don't remember what the lease amount is.
There is no, that's just it. It's predicated on revenue from the coffee shop.
Yeah, I think that's why I don't know
I mean,
the
so
amount.
I guess what I'm asking is if the coffee shop goes away, where does the rent revenue come from? Do we then have a...
Well, I just don't think this lease, I don't think the existing lease could cover this facility
Well, that's
without
what I was asking.
redoing the whole thing and putting it out for bid. I just don't think.
But that's what I was asking you, I guess.
But you're right on the payment. I forgot that.
Yeah, and we can look at an amendment, especially to the lease, as well as the profit associated with the township.
But that
No
one,
doubt this would be a nice amenity for the township. I think that's clear, but unfortunately it has a little hair on it.
Every project has a little hair on it.
And we went, Mr. Dollar did a similar presentation a few years back, and there was going to be some private public use of the facility. I think that was because that was also going to be on township property. He was pitching the idea up at Rolling Hills. And I think my concern always is the township leasing property in and of itself for profit, but at least it benefits the residents. And I don't know if we're in the business of doing that to just basically renting for commercial use and gain. I don't know if we're allowed to go that far.
Particularly since it's required to service that residential plan. I mean, I think that's the other thing. If it wasn't that, you could say, oh, sell it to them and be done with it. But because that already exists, we have to maintain it. The township has to maintain ownership. Am I correct?
Yeah, I mean, I think what Mark said, we could probably amend that and put something comparable in place, but you'd also have to look at what that maintenance obligation would look like down the road.
see, I think you could change the manner in which we do stormwater management. I think, if council wanted to move ahead with this and wanted to put in tanks, I think you can do that. I'm just suggesting to you, I don't think that's prudent.
Could we put the stormwater facility on the property that we just acquired to the left?
Over
West
through here.
side, yeah. Could it be moved? Would that solve it? And then we could...
Yeah, you know what, I don't know whether physically you can do that or not, but I mean, that's something we could actually look at.
But I do remember getting back to Mr. Dollard, I think what had the board at least interested in the project was some use for the public, that it was on township property. And at least I remember that. The board never approved it, but at least they were interested because there was going to be some notion where either at a reduced cost or that the township residents could actually use something that's on township property that they collectively own.
Well, the problem with the last proposal was the manner in which we acquired the property.
That's true. There was that feature. Although we were going to put some recreation, but then we never really heard back, I guess, on that. But
Yeah. And Mr. Dollard did want to be here tonight. He's at one of his camps in Utah, unfortunately, at this time. And, whether this is something we can kind of have a little bit more continued discussion with staff, solicitor in regard to, as well as engineer, talking about stormwater management, the alternatives with it. We wanted to be able to present this plan to you to get some of the comments from the board, additional comments from staff.
And without looking at the lease, I mean, my initial reaction, this exceeds the scope of the original lease, right? That you just not going to use that pond area to build something that you want.
And we understand there'd be a need to, whether I'll use the word amendment to the lease.
Well, and my concern with
Yes.
that too is if we amended, we'd have to put it back out for bid for anyone to do this, if this is what we wanted to do. We wanted the coffee shop.
So is there,
I mean, I think that the general sense of council, I think, is that this is an attractive amenity, and it's worth talking about, and there's a lot of things that need to be discussed.
so
Bob, you have something?
Well, I'm not opposed to it. I guess I need to confirm in my head that the original approved plan is now off the table. I think that's what they've said. Medical office building.
It's still an approved plan, but yes, we're looking at the alternatives.
Then I have no business making these comments, but at the same point in time, I look at your proposed sequencing, and it seems inverse of what I would think is being feasible. Phase 2, to me, much more likely Phase 1 than what the issues are with the Phase 2. And the second comment I have is to place tanks below the grade of Brush Run, I think becomes a technical issue, how you grade them or how you maintain a flow coming out of them.
The pond now sits quite a bit above Brush Run, so I'm
Correct.
thinking that your thought process is that they won't be below the.
They wouldn't be below. They wouldn't be below the elevation of Brush Run, because you have to have positive drainage to get it down to Brush
What
Run.
you're going to do if you dug it right alongside of where the stream is, that you're going to be below the stream.
Well, what we're doing is, actually, if you can maybe slide up to the.
That's all right. That's
Yeah.
not an answer that I need
Yeah.
now.
Oh, yeah. The other way. Sorry.
Because what concerned me more is that proposed underneath a permanent building structure right now.
Correct, which is why we are looking to do more of a
Struck me
tank.
fine, yeah.
And that tank would be located into here. And once again, we still have, I think, about 10 to 12 feet of elevation change that takes place between here and where the Brush Creek is. But that, once again, that gets into the additional details of the stormwater management reports.
This is a smaller issue if we even got to this point where we're going to do this, is that there would have to probably be some discussion about what activities could take place there, because certainly, given the situation with our tennis center, I certainly wouldn't want another private facility to compete for tennis players.
that's an interesting observation, but.
Well,
it's a
but
valid
this,
one.
regardless of whether this is tennis or pickleball, and again, well, no, but let me finish.
I'm not worried about the pickleball.
No, no.
We don't have any pickleball
No.
over there.
You should be worried. Whether it's tennis or pickleball, if you look at them, and again, this isn't going to happen tomorrow, but if you're looking at the master plan for Rolling Hills Park, it's a racket facility and it's all racket sports. So it's tennis, pickleball, paddleball. But that's so far down the line, I don't know whether it's a problem or not.
See, it seems like there's not enough information to even make any kind of recommendation at this point. We've just brought up a bunch of different issues. Could those tanks be used? Could the stormwater be moved? How would the lease have to be changed? You know, maybe we need to just table this.
And we understand that this was our first step in front of council, very much like where we were 3 years ago. I think when Tom was talking about the dessert shop at that time. We know there's some additional steps that need to take place. We need to continue to be working with staff as well as the solicitor, just because of the legal end of things.
Well, I'll make a motion that we table this pending investigation of other options as have been discussed, and consider it at a future meeting.
Second.
Discussion, in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you for your time this evening.
Interesting idea. Keep talking to you. All right, next item is approval of the nuisance subdivision draws prepared by RCMC dated May 25th for donation.
Have they just taken 10 acres from that big parcel and added it to the little parcel?
No, it's taking, 10 acres from that big parcel, adding it to this other parcel that is hatched. Yes.
It should be a no-brainer.
Yes.
I make a motion that we approve that, subject to all the conditions that were placed on it by planning.
Discussion, in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Request for Columbia Gas a request for Columbia Gas to discharge water on township-owned property.
So I presume they're going to put some stone at the bottom of this pipe and
Yes.
make it drain properly. No, they're not
Right,
just
and
going to direct it down.
it drains into a large swale, and it's not an
Where's it going
issue.
to drain to?
It's going to drain into the swale on Arrowhead Trail. And
Into the swell that's there
Yeah.
already, right? All right, I'll make a motion that we grant Columbia Gas permission to discharge a French drain on the township property in accordance with the drawings titled Slip Mitigation Outlet Exhibit prepared by Arcadis.
I'll second.
Is there any chance that there could be an issue at some point?
this, no, none whatsoever.
Do we need a written agreement with Columbia Gas?
This is such a minor, I guess we can do that, but this is such a minor discharge onto that.
I mean, it's going to go into an existing swell anyway,
Yeah.
right?
But are they going to maintain it if something happens to it?
It's on our property. We're going to maintain it on our property just like we would anything else.
There won't be any MS4 issues about what's draining out of there?
No.
Mr. Zelinas is,
I don't see any issue.
okay, thank you. Was there a second?
Yep.
Oh,
In favor?
Aye.
Good.
Opposed?
Nay.
6.
Resolution public comment.
I just wondered where this is at.
It's on, behind a home on Saratoga Drive.
Where's Saratoga? I need a map.
Off of Thomas
Thomas.
Street, which is off of East McMurray.
Yeah.
So-
Is it past that big new house built on the left?
Along the trail, do you know where the Great Gyro place is?
Yeah, okay, it's up. Okay, thank you.
Okay, resolution establishing banking account at First National Bank.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
So we can spread our money around.
Is that what we're doing, spreading our money around?
No, actually, we have a self-imposed restriction on how much money can sit in any one bank. And when we moved to Washington Financial, we now go over that limit. We have a large CD that sits there for post-retirement benefits, and we're moving that to a different location.
So we're spreading our money around.
That's right, we're spreading our money around.
As long as it's covered by the
Yeah, it is,
FDIC
yeah.
insurance. Okay.
Authorization to purchase property located at the intersection of Valley Brook and Maplewood Road.
So we went back to the individual who represents CAM Property Corporation. This is this small parcel of land that sits at the corner of Maplewood and Valley Brook Road. They are willing to sell it to us for $2,000.
Who is CAM?
It's a corporation located in Little Washington who exists for the purpose of holding real estate property
And do you know
and
the
renting.
principals?
I do not know the principals.
I just wondered, this wasn't an issue until it was discussed at a council meeting, then it was bought for $600, now they're trying to sell it to us for 4 times that.
Well, the reason is that when they bought it at tax sale, the deed indicates that it's a half-acre property. What they discovered with our help is that this property is substantially smaller than a half-acre. I think it has value to the township because, as you can see there, it will not solve the site distance problem at Maplewood and Valley Brook. But I think it will enhance the site distance, and I think it's better in our hands than theirs. So,
They're not going to keep paying the taxes. They'll just let it go up for tax sale.
and that's the other possibility. You can sit around and wait for it to go up for tax sale again.
Yeah, and then you got to count somebody else isn't going to buy it.
$2,000.
It's $2,000. That's yes.
No, but here's the deal. So can we just have them cited because of the vegetation?
No, because I don't think it's a violation of our site triangle.
Can we install a concave mirror across?
I don't think you want to install mirrors on state roads because they become a nightmare for maintenance. They get broken, and then you create a liability because the mirror's not there and you have an accident. That's why you don't see mirrors anyplace.
Well, here's the thing, and we've had so many people complain about this site, this issue here, and now we have a chance to fix it. So,
Remedy may be hard, but we can improve it.
I was going to say, unless we fix the problem, we're spending $2,000 for nothing.
I move that we authorize the township solicitor and the township manager to negotiate a sales agreement for the acquisition of a parcel owned by CAM Property Corporation located at the intersection of Valley Brook Road and Maplewood Drive for the amount of $2,000.
Second.
Any other discussion? In favor?
Aye.
Nay.
Opposed? Okay. Enforcement of township ordinances.
Mrs. Merrill had asked this to be placed on the agenda for discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Lauer. Over the past few months, the reason I asked for this is over the past few months, a number of ordinance violations have come to my attention, either from me driving around or people calling me about different things. I don't know how they occurred. I'm not exactly sure. They could be due to the failure of a resident to get a permit, a resident to follow through on the permit, maybe not build what they intended, or as well as contractors not complying with the tenets of the ordinances. Compounding this, I think there's been some inconsistent enforcement of the violations for whatever reason. Some cases the violation's minor, but they remain unresolved. We have in the planning department report in the docket lists of violations that have been open for a while and they're past the abatement date. And there are more, and they're minor, relatively minor when you think in terms of residents, but there are more egregious violations that may be discovered after the fact, and there may or may not be any enforcement done at all because it's kind of a done deal. Regardless of how the violations happen, I don't think any of us support inconsistent application of the ordinances. I think we need to enforce the ordinances consistently, both during construction and after the fact if violations are found later. I realize the township has had problems hiring building inspectors, and we're paying consultants to pick up the slack, but regardless, this needs to be addressed in my opinion. And again, I'm not going to tell you that there are multitudes, but I think that there are enough that if we were called to task about inconsistency, we would have a hard time defending ourselves. And I just wanted to know what the rest of council thinks, and if we can figure out a way to help planning or what we can do to make sure we're consistently applying the ordinances we're writing.
Aren't we limited to what we could actually charge or enforce?
Well, if I can give you an example that's out there right now and what we're doing, and I think it's typical of what we try to do. I think that the first thing you have to understand, and this is, in one of the emails I received, someone made a reference to something about what occurs in the police department, and I think that's probably a good place to go look, because if you would to talk to Chief Crimes, what he would tell you is his goal is compliance. His goal is not to penalize people. And I think our goal within in administering the zoning ordinances, the building codes, is compliance. And so how we get there may be different based upon the situation we're dealing with and the individuals we're dealing with. So right now, this shed construction of this shed was begun on a property on the northern part of Route 19. And by chance, the same day that I noticed this shed under construction, two people in the planning department noticed this shed under construction. This shed does not have a building permit. There was no revision of the site plan. So if you were to go up there right now, you would notice that somewhere on one of the sides of this is a red sticker that's a stop work order, and a letter was issued to these individuals.
Where is this?
Moccasin and Old Washington.
Yeah. And so what we will do with this individual, because they have been compliant in terms of stopping work, we will work with them
to determine whether or not that shed, a site plan for that shed can be done at its current location, and send them through the planning process. We will send them back, if in fact that's the case, we will send them back to get a building permit before they proceed further. If that is not the case, you know, the most we can do at the magistrate's office is take this down to them and have them fined. But that fine is so de minimis, and it doesn't cause them to tear the structure down. So the only way that occurs is to employ the services of the solicitor in common pleas court. And before we would do that, we would be back to you and asked to do that.
Just out of curiosity, what is it supposed to be?
Is it a garage?
A shed, a storage shed.
Yeah.
And they didn't know they had to get a building permit?
Did not know. People in Peters don't realize that certain projects need permits.
But I will tell you this, and I think Ed would agree with us. The vast majority of people in Peters Township do know that they need to get building permits, and they come in and get them. But there are occasions when people start work and we don't know it, and we're not everywhere in the township all the time, and so we rely upon, you know, somebody from the Public Works Department, somebody from the Police Department, a neighbor spotting these things and letting us know so that in fact we can take action. So
the person building the shed themselves?
No.
This is actually a company. Contractor, yeah.
The contractor doesn't know you need a building.
Oh, this to my way of thinking, this is an egregious thing because there is no contractor out there who doesn't know he needs to get a building permit. So there are homeowners who don't know that they need to get a building permit for something.
I mean, as a contractor that is building something, who knows you need a permit, who's not doing it, I would look at the contractor's license. That we can pull.
Right.
We don't issue contractor's license.
We can request for the contractor's license be pulled. That's Department of Labor.
And to Mr. Ball's point, I agree that if you find somebody doing something and they were like, oh my God, I didn't know. I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about being punitive to people who got off to the wrong track. We've already talked about the fact that there are a lot of people who aren't sure what to do. And some of them wander into planning and ask. And planning's very nice about explaining the process. But some of them don't come in for whatever reason. Wherever they came from, it didn't happen or whatever. If you catch someone in the act and you correct them, I'm with you 100%. Don't be punitive. Straighten them out, get the permit, make sure they do what they have to do. If it's in the wrong place, it's going to have to be torn down if it violates variance, unless they go for variance. I'm talking about projects that are completed when people knew what was right and they did the wrong thing. And we are not consistent about necessarily how we address those kind of things. And how long do you allow somebody to be non-compliant? You're saying that the magistrate gives de minimis fines.
Well, no, he gives fines in accordance with the ordinance, but our ordinance, the fines that can be levied are de minimis.
Which is limited by statute.
Yeah.
You know, at what point does the township go and say we're tearing it down?
We've done that. We've torn sheds down the last 2 years. One recently, the one that was built at too close to the property line, they made them move it, and that was probably within the last month or two. Was that the one that went to did a variance and failed?
It's still sitting there.
Well, didn't she? She's in the process.
In the process of being moved.
Yeah. But anyway, that's been going through the process. What I will tell you is a handful of times that I've gone down to the township that made it to the Court of Common Pleas, I'd say almost every single time the court wants compliance with the code. So oftentimes it might be a property maintenance issue. They don't even want the money. In fact, we get to the point where the township would rather see them use the $500 towards fixing the property maintenance violation versus otherwise. But we've never gone to a hearing because they always try. It's like a criminal proceeding at that time to work it out. But to your point, there are occasions, I know you brought one up at the last meeting, where, okay, now we see that it's in violation. The wall's too high or what have you. On some of those, because they're initial construction, once we issue occupancy permits, we run into estoppel issues. We run into waiver issues. That the mistake is there and the mistake is once we've blessed it, it's tough to go to court and walk it back.
But in Mr. Ball's example, when these are contractors working in our township who know what the rules are and violate the rules, maybe you can't fix that. Is there anything alternative that you can do? Because they obviously...
Yeah, I agree. Like, this is ridiculous in terms of somebody building that big a structure on a commercial state highway without a permit. But again, they stop work, and the punishment right now is they're stopped work. And until they come into compliance, they can't go forward. Does it make sense for us to go and get, I'm not even sure that the magistrate would, by the time we would get a hearing date and the permits were all back in issue, would even levy a fine at that point.
Well, there's the issue, and maybe I'm incorrect about the wall along Saratoga, the Gabion baskets. I mean, was that
Is that the taller one?
I'm trying to understand at what point.
And I think we can discuss that up to a point, but it may make sense at some point to talk about that in executive session. But what happened there was, it's at the end of the street. The building inspector, for some reason, happened to be on Saratoga that day and discovered it. It was 70% done at that point. The explanation from the owner was that it was an emergency repair because he had a slip on his property that was of concern with regard to his home, and that's why he went ahead. He was told at that point that he was in violation, that he needed to come in with an engineered drawing. He brought us a drawing that was something that I would have sketched and completed the work. But at that point, and if there wasn't a thing that we should have done in that case, what we should have done in retrospect is to come to council and ask the council whether or not you wanted that wall torn out. That would have been the only remedy that would have been available to you at the time.
And of course, that would entail going to common pleas court.
Yes, and like, one of the things that you would not have wanted to do in that case is to make him come in and get a permit. He couldn't have got a permit because he couldn't have given us an engineered drawing that showed that, nor would we have had any way to verify that, in fact, it had been constructed according to that engineered drawing. So, I think we're in a better, this is not an excuse, but you're in a better situation with a permit not having been issued in something that doesn't have a drawing with an engineered seal.
Yeah, I think it's just about obviously catching them at the right time, because working with Ed, Kristen, and Seth, they're pretty aggressive. I mean, they don't. If they find out there's a problem, they go after it. They never give anybody, we'll just go ahead and do it. Yeah. The calls I receive, they're pretty like, can we do it? They shut them down.
I think one thing we can do is before we issue the occupancy permit, somebody needs to go out there and make sure, just eyeball to make sure there's nothing that's glaringly in violation of the ordinance.
Yeah, so I think that was my point. Once you said, now can we go back after? Once we issued occupancy.
We do that now.
Well, okay.
We get the, I think we get the picture.
But I agree with what you said, Paul. That's the way we should do it. We should try to work with it. It shouldn't be punitive.
If I could just summarize, my point is this, and I managed people for a long, long time, and if you do not follow the rules and apply your rules consistently, so that when people don't do what they're supposed to do and there's some repercussion, there's no incentive for the people who do the right thing to keep doing the right thing.
But I do think these are more outliers. I think you'll find, if you look through their records, that this group applies it across the board. I mean, it's very seldom that I see things slip like what you described. I've seen it.
I am not saying there's a lot of them, but I'm saying that there are potential issues, and I'm trying to
And that's fair.
Because when people come up to me and say, why is that allowed?
I agree. I understand.
I can appreciate that.
You have a comment?
Irene.
That's crazy.
I state my name again. Irene Changle. I live at the Waters. I have about 3 questions. How many of these inspectors does the township have? 2 currently?
We have normally 2 building inspectors. We have 1 right now, and we have people under, third-party inspectors under contract to help us.
Okay, how many inspectors did you have when the Waters was built?
We had 2 building inspectors.
And how often did they
They
inspect?
spent quite a bit of time at the Waters.
They did.
Mhm.
Well, I'm not satisfied with their work. And who inspects the inspectors?
That would be me.
That would be you. Good. I forget the other question. Thank you.
All right, moving rapidly onward, the payroll and bills.
Yes, Council, the payroll for September 17th was about $380,000, including salaries, deferred comp, and taxes. Accounts payable is now up to about $700,000 with the bills I just signed. Mostly capital expenses, Leah Carius, EPM, and Macaroni. I've reviewed the bills and the pay report and suggest we pay them as submitted.
Second.
The discussion, in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Correspondence, there is none. Anybody want to talk about any of the reports?
Could I ask Mr. Zook a question about the cell tower permit for Orchard Hills? Or is an HOA allowed to, if they have a place to do a cell tower, could they ask for a permit for that? I thought that Orchard Hills was a HOA. I was just asking.
There's a tower on, it's not actually part of Orchard Hill, it's adjacent to Orchard Hill. What's it say in there?
It just said it was a permit. It was on your permit issue list. Permits.
The existing tower that is by Orchard Hill, they replaced an antenna on it.
Okay, so an HOA can ask for something.
It's not an
It's
HOA.
not an HOA, it's on a separate parcel.
It's a
I think it's owned by
Crown Castle.
Oh, okay.
Crown Castle owns
I
it.
misunderstood. No, I was just trying to think of, I was just trying to think of places where we could get some of those so service could get better.
Miscellaneous?
I just have a couple of things. If you get a chance, one of the projects that Ryan worked with the EQB board on was a pollinator garden down at Elm Grove. It's on a slope that sits behind the soccer fields. It has come in, and it is a good example of what can be done with pollinator gardens. One of the things that Ryan is setting up is a meeting with the individual out of Cal U to go over to the Rolling Hills Park, and we're going to look at that in terms of some of those steep slopes and whether or not they're suitable to do pollinator gardens as opposed to maintaining the grass on there. But
I'm all for that.
Yeah, could I ask another?
what's that?
Put it in amongst the weed garden.
Well, I think this garden right now in bloom looks wonderful. Winter will come, and it will.
There's some weeds though, like
yes.
what's that?
Milkweed, yes.
Butterflies, those monarchs, they love them.
Yeah.
That habitat's, disappearing. So, whatever it takes. But I'd rather have something that benefits nature than ragweed that doesn't benefit anything.
Yeah, well, and something we don't have to mow.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to talk to you about, I did have a meeting with representatives from AT&T, and we talked about the 5G cell towers. They are going to move ahead with that project, and in terms of the Waters Group, what they're talking about is a pole along Friar Lane in the vicinity of the Waters Group. So this would be a new pole in that area. There are 5 other locations along East McMurray Road and Thomas Road where these towers will be going in. The other thing we talked about, and I had mentioned this to council previously, and they had a change in personnel at AT&T, and I think that's what put it on pause. There's interest to put in a cell tower in the vicinity of Hofbauer Field. And what the township would get from this outside of, you'd have cell service along Beamont Road finally, is that they would put light standers on the side of Hossbauer Field that currently is not lit and is used for football practice, and they would do that at their own cost. In addition to that, the township would receive monthly lease payments for that tower, and you would have also the possibility of not only AT&T being on that tower, but also someone like Verizon. So
Sounds like a win-win.
But yeah, but lest anybody get too excited, my question is: so when do we see this? And this could be sometime next year before you see these 5G cell towers going.
How tall are these 5G towers? The ones?
They're like telephone pole height.
You really should sit closer to the front of the room.
I need the exercise.
Plenty of chairs there in the front row.
Where is Waters on this? Right?
That great big white structure.
Big white.
That way. Use your little light.
It's
the big monstrosity.
The lower right corner here.
all this.
Yeah.
That's a good word.
Okay. So where are they going to put this pole?
Probably along here somewhere.
All right. Well, all right. There's a parking lot, and then the church is up there. Is that the highest point?
No, the 5G towers aren't done that way.
Yeah, they don't need the height.
They don't need the height,
No,
even though we're in the valley.
No, it's going to be along this road. You'd have 5G service inside the building.
If it was way down here lower, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter, but it's going to be up here.
How high it is.
It's going to be up here.
And is it going to service all the different cell phone providers?
It's going to be an AT&T 5G tower. So it's going to be AT&T.
Who will it help? Will it help
Anybody who has AT&T service.
Jitterbug or all those different?
Whoever has AT&T service.
Verizon?
Agreements between them all.
Yeah.
You wouldn't know that.
Yeah.
You don't know
They
that.
have to, sometimes the SIM card or whatever that's called is specific to a.
It's going to be AT&T.
But I'm saying you could have a phone by a certain provider and it has a card that.
Yes.
We won't have to plug in things into our walls to get
Nope.
something that you put on the.
Nope.
On the
Unless you
phone.
want to, we can call them. I'm just kidding.
And how many, did they get 3 different companies that 2 out of 3 that they're going with right now?
AT&T.
That's the only one.
It's going to be their cell tower. Yes.
But did they approach 3 different companies and choose from 2, and now they're going to do?
No, we.
How did they do it? See, we're not getting any information down here. I'm sorry.
AT&T is a service provider in the area.
The whole township? Or just this area?
No, the entire township.
Okay.
And they have a plan to bring 5G service throughout the community. And where they're starting are these 6 locations along East McMurray and Valley Brook Road.
Okay.
But they are not the exclusive provider of cell service in Western Pennsylvania or in Peters.
But in that building, as I understand it, your AT&T phone doesn't work, your Verizon phone doesn't work. So this will not solve the problem with people who have a service provider who's Verizon.
And our landlines will work on this? Our landline phones?
No, this is wireless.
This is wireless.
This is cellular.
Because we're having problems with not only the landline phones, the TVs too. We're getting Spanish through. I mean, you wouldn't believe.
One thing, since the high school's opened up in the morning, there's a lot of traffic coming down Saratoga, cutting through, avoiding Valley Brook, congestion. And so left-hand turns, they want to make them on Thomas. Now Thomas is backed up, and a lot of them going down to Thomas making left-hand turns. Could we restrict during the high school time that no left turns off Saratoga?
No
like
left
between 7.
No left-hand turns?
You mean right-hand turns?
No, come down, they want to make a left so that they can go up to Seventh Church and come around the back way.
Oh.
Because now it's all backed up here. And the reason it's backed up here is because people are trying to make left-hand turns in the morning onto East McMurray.
Well,
So it's gotten really congested.
you know what, let us do this. Let us have the traffic
Just
engineer.
a thought.
Let us have the traffic engineer take a look at it.
I remember proposing this a while ago about making Thomas no left turn during certain hours, like, before school and then in the evening. Because that jams up, that used to jam up a lot of
It
traffic.
jams up, yeah.
But I don't know about now that we have, those other lanes, but.
Well, we were supposed to have a light there, and we've kind of pushed that back since we made that extra right-hand turning lane off of East McMurray. But
So what time are you seeing this?
in the morning, when high school is, so I don't know what time they.
Okay, let me find
The
out.
buses pick up around 10 to 7, so it must be from 4:45 till what, 7:15?
Okay, let's take a look.
I did have a question, Mr. Lauer, for those of us who might be interested. Would it be possible to actually take a look at some of the survey comments for the proposed aquatic center? I've been hearing some comments from people about, well, I said yes, but I also said, or I said no, but I also said. It'd be interesting. I'm sure not everyone wants to read them, but I might want to take a look. Okay, we'll make
Anything
arrangements.
else, other people?
All right.
All right, we are adjourned.
We don't have an executive session.
Just very briefly.
All right, let's get it.